Alright, welcome back. Today we are going to be going over all of the king perks in Nine Kings. So all 81 king perks. If you haven't yet already, feel free to check out my perk tree, rainbow perks, and universal perks video. I'll link it right here. And this video will go more in depth on each of the king perks and some suggested perk trees for different builds that I've tried out and I enjoy. So let's just hop right into it. So we're going to start with King of Nothing, and we're just going to go through each of these. First, we have Valiant. Paladins start with +3 units. This can be really strong because Paladins normally start with 3 units, so getting an additional 3 is a lot. And then if you pair that with Nationalist or Verticalist and Leftist, you can get a lot more Paladins at the start every time you put down Paladins. Next up is Mauler. Mauler says that the castle boulders have plus 10% attack area. This is great because obviously it's increasing your area of attack, and so more units on the enemy team can be hit and killed by your castle. Next, we have Sentinel. So scout towers shoot +1 arrow. Again, if you pair this with the Verticalist, Nationalist, or Leftist and get it multiplied, like having your scout towers shoot so many more arrows is really strong, especially if you're going like a tower build. So that is a great choice. Agricultural is next. Start with +1 farm card in your hand. Again, if you pair it with Nationalist, Verticalist, Leftist, you can start with multiple farm cards in your hand, so that will make it easy to scale your troops from an early year. Alternatively, you could sell those cards before your first shop in the well for 9 gold each, and then have more money for that shop. That is another strategy. Next is Protector. Troops start with +1 steel coat. Again, this stacks, so any troop that you put down, not just the King of Nothing troops, anytime you put a new troop card down on your plot, it will start with a steel coat stack on it. So again, if you multiply that, you will get more than 1 steel coat stack, however many it's multiplied by. Next is Stubborn. You start with +3 free rerolls. This is the same as Persistent on the universal perks. So this has the opportunity to give you 12 free rerolls if you pair it with Verticalist, Nationalist, and Leftist. So this is how you can get 12 free rerolls, which is not possible with Persistent. So if you want 12 free rerolls and using your Nationalist, Leftist, and Verticalist like this, then that is how you can get 12 free rerolls. Next, we have Recruiter. So soldiers have +10% to all stats. It's pretty good, especially if you're going soldiers. Feel free to multiply that and really increase their stats. Same with Farsighted. Archers have +20% range. Again, you can multiply that and they can get a very far range. I don't really feel like they need it, but you know, if you're a Farsighted fan, let me know in the comments below. And last but not least, we have Berserk. All Nothing cards start with +10% attack speed. So if you are using a King of Nothing card, so archers, scout towers, castles, soldiers, paladins, they're all getting a +10% attack speed boost to that plot. And it does not work for other King's cards. So here's one of my King of Nothing perk trees. If you were thinking about going like a tower run and you needed some ideas on how to formulate a perk tree, I've got my Leftist, Verticalist, Expander, Nationalist here. And then I've got Mauler ×4 and Sentinel ×4. So Sentinel's going to boost your scout towers to shoot an additional arrow. And then I've got Moderate giving us, these are the base ones I always like to have, is Ingenious, Persistent, and Politician, and Castilian. And then if you're going for towers, Fortifier is really nice, and then I just like having Holy. And then we have Berserk to help give our scout towers additional attack speed, and you could of course change this. And then this last perk slot is kind of here for whatever you want. If you want to banish a king from your run, you can banish a king from your run. If you want to take some paladins starting with additional units just so you get additional units to support your towers, then awesome. Or maybe you want all of your troops to start with a steel coat with Protector. There's just a, it's kind of personal preference at that point. And I mean, the entire perk tree is personal preference and for the kind of run that you're doing. So, this is just kind of what I would make my perk tree look like if I were doing like a tower run. And you can always modify this so that you have your nationalist, verticalist, leftist without the expander, so that you can get Sentinel times 4, Mauler times 4, and Stubborn times 4 while keeping Ingenious and Politician times 2 with moderate. But then you lose out on all those other perks. So just keep that in mind. If you're going for a troop build and don't really want to have that expander, or you don't have it unlocked yet, this is another option, is having like Valiant, Recruiter, and Agricultural to support your paladins and soldiers. Alternatively, you could give your archers 20% range times 4. I prefer steel coat stacks, and then also you could potentially give up a royal decree option and additional levels to your base for starting with a farm card in your hand, or giving the castle builders 10% attack area. If I'm going troops, I'd much prefer to use the expander. So another option for your perk tree, if you are going for troops on King of Nothing, you could put Valiant, Protector, and Agricultural over here with Nationalist to get times 2 on them. So you'd start with 2 farm cards, 2 steel coat stacks on all of your units, and plus 6 paladins on your starting plot. Then you could use Farsighted and Berserk just times 1, or switch them out here with Recruiter. This right now would be giving soldiers 30% to all stats. So, I mean, any of these can go wherever you want, but that's kind of the troop oriented perks. I am always pretty much going to take Ingenious and Politician. And then if you use Persistent, if it's not next to Nationalist, it's better to use Persistent with the Moderate, so you get times 2, so you get 6 free rerolls instead of, if you used Stubborn, you only get 3. And that's my little trick on King of Nothing. But then Nurturer can also be nice with your troops, or Swift or Wrathful. So it's kind of up to you on what you want to do. You might not need these. You might say, let's put Swift up here so you get this times 2, so plus 10% attack speed to all your units, which is the same as this Berserk. So together, I mean, they stack. So you get plus 10% from this and plus 10% from this. Notice that Swift is all troops and Berserk is only for nothing cards. So that includes your towers and your castle. So that's something to keep in mind, is that it includes non-troops, and this one is only troops. So that's it for King of Nothing. Next we have King of Spells. First, we have Ruthless. Ruthless says Citadel attack has a 5% chance to insta-kill. Now your Citadel has a damage, and then it causes like a static to go through the troops and do damage, but this can make the damage infinity for an insta-kill. You get a 5% chance. Again, this can be really strong if you multiply that through Nationalist, Leftist, Verticalist, and that will stack. Next, we have Electric. Static causes +1 damage. If you use the static enchantment, it will do an additional damage for every time this is multiplied. Next is Seer. Spires start with +1 beam. This just allows your spires to heal more troops at one time. Next, we have Scholar. Libraries have a +5% success rate. Again, if you pair this so that it gets up to a 10 or 15% success rate, your libraries start at 50% success rate, so you can definitely get your libraries to try to succeed more often and add more enchantments to your troops. Next, we have Mystic. Start with +1 completely random enchantment in hand. This is one of the ones that I do like to multiply and start with because I like having enchantments and I get to put them on my troops early, and so then they are strong. Same with Scroll Master. You start with +1 completely random tome card in hand, and this one is very fun because I like my tome cards more than my enchantments. So again, multiplying this, you can get up to 4 completely random tome cards for free in your hand, either to play or to sell and have money for that first shot. Next is Sorceress. It says Warlocks have plus 20% attack area. So Warlocks do area damage, so increasing that attack area is a great way to do more damage to more enemy troops at the same time. Next is Eldritch. Shamans deal plus 10% damage. Shamans buff your other troops, and so this will give them plus 10% damage to deal. Arcane, wizards get plus 10% attack speed. This isn't bad, especially if you multiply it. Wizards have a really low attack speed. I think they start at 0.1 hits per second. So if you can multiply Arcane by like 4, then that will really help you. If you can get something else to get their attack speed up, it'll definitely help you get there quicker. But they have a very slow attack speed, so Arcane is nice to have. King of Spells, I think this is the tree that I used to beat King 9-7 on. It's very strong to have. I have Scholar, Ruthless, and Scrollmaster times 4. So that means I get plus 20% success rate on the library. A library normally has 50% success rate. And so having them at 70% and then leveling them up, that's 70% per proc on the library. So that is very helpful. Ruthless is probably one of my favorite perks. So this will give it a 20% chance to instantly kill anything that isn't the champion. So unless you're in like year 33, 66, or I think 99, you cannot insta-kill bosses. Just keep that in mind, that you do need an additional damage source, but it'll insta-kill anything else. You've got a 20% chance for it to go off. That's 1 in 5 hits. And then Scrollmaster, I just like having tome cards. If you prefer enchantments, you can more than easily switch this out for Mystic and get an enchantment to your hand. I just like my tome cards more. So this is what I did, and then I'm always taking Ingenious and Politician times 2 with Moderate. So another option for the King of Spells perk tree, you could keep your Scholar, Ruthless, and Scrollmaster. If you put Nationalist over here, you can get Scholar, Scrollmaster, and Sorceress, or any other King perks that you decide are important to you. Put that here, and then I've got like Electric here, and then using Moderate, I've got Ingenious, Persistent, Politician, Castilian, and Holy. And then here you've got another spot for a times 3, so I like putting Ruthless there so that the Citadel gets a 15% to insta-kill, but you could of course change that out with Scrollmaster, Scholar, whatever you see fit, right? So this is kind of a buffing the Citadel, buffing your base kind of run. If you wanted to go more for like a troop build and not focus on your Citadel as much, you could use like Eldritch, Sorceress, and Electric next to Nationalist here and get them all times 2, and then focus on getting Shamans, Warlocks, and Static stacks. And then times 3 up here, I've got Wizards get 30% attack speed. So we all know their attack speed is very low, so that is very helpful. And then when you go troops, having Nurturer and Swift, especially on these low hits per second troops, can really be a nice boost. But then, of course, I'm keeping Ingenious, Persistent, and Politician. But if you don't feel like you need those, then you can always change that out for like a Wrathful or Holy or some other King perk that you see fit. And you could get rid of Ruthless and give your libraries a 5% chance to successfully hit, or switch this out here and just let Static do an additional damage, and your libraries get a plus 10% success rate. It's really up to you. Alternatively, you're using Banisher or Seasoned to get more XP or to banish a king. So this is just a nice little setup. Alright, next up is King of Greed. We'll start with Tycoon. Mercenaries normally cost 15 gold, but with Tycoon, mercenaries cost -1 gold. This can make your mercenaries cost a lot less so that you get more with less gold that you have. But remember that, let's say you have Tycoon multiplied by 2, so your mercenaries cost 13 gold each. That means every time you spend 13 gold, you're going to lose a mercenary, as well as whenever you gain 13 gold, you get mercenaries. So just keep that in mind when you're using the Tycoon perk. Goon. Thieves deal plus 20% critical damage. Now note that this is not critical hit chance. This is crit damage. So they will deal plus 20% crit damage. If you can get Scimitar's Royal Decree, which makes it so that your thieves are always critically striking enemies, this is a really great perk to have, especially if you multiply it. You're getting a lot more critical damage on your enemies basically for free. Next is Fixer, so your dispenser starts with plus 10% damage. Dispensers don't start with too much damage, so this is a nice way to boost it early. So your dispenser naturally gets hits per second increase equal to half of the gold that you gain. So every year when you get 9 gold, you get 4.5% increase on your hits per second. Once you hit 99.999 hits per second on your dispenser, you will start getting damage instead of hits per second. So dispenser is very nice early, but once you hit 99 hits per second, you're getting extra damage anyway. So just keep that in mind if you are taking the Fixer perk. I enjoy the Peddler perk and multiplying it so that you get a free shop purchase and then multiplying it so you get like 2 or 3. That is a lot of money. One free shop purchase is 30 gold. 2 is 30 plus 45, and if you get 3, that's 30 plus 45 plus 60 gold. That is more than 100 gold. That's a lot of gold that you're getting out of a perk. Well, gold equivalent, because you're getting it in cards from the shop. Next up is Planner. Planner says losing a life gives you plus 50 gold. I like this, and I like multiplying at least by 2, so you get 100 gold when you lose a life, especially if you are struggling and then you like get rebirth after you've lost 2 lives. Then you've already gotten more gold. More gold gives you more mercenaries. More gold, especially like a large chunk all at once, will give you such a big boost on your dispensers. If you get 100 gold, you will get a plus 50% boost to your hits per second on your dispenser, which is just huge. And it's also a lot of mercenaries. So Planner is very nice. So Nepo Baby says start with plus 30 gold. So this is what you go maybe if you're not going to try to lose any lives, but it pairs well with Tycoon so that you can get more mercenaries up front in those early years. So Patron says Overinvest gives plus 2% to all stats. Overinvest is already giving you plus 15% to all stats. So I personally don't really take Patron because I feel like the 2% is not enough. But if you are going all in on overinvesting, definitely multiplying this times 3 or 4 and getting plus 6 or 8% to all stats on every single overinvest is really, really going to add up. Next is Oligarch. Start with plus 1 vault card in your hand. Vaults are just a nice card to have in your hand on King of Greed so that you can get more mercenaries and buff your dispensers early and ensure that you get to play a vault card. And last but not least, we have Smuggler. Mortgage gives plus 10 gold. So I think I've tried this before to see if it gives it per level, because Mortgage gives 30 gold per level of the thing being mortgaged. And I believe that Smuggler only gives the plus 10 gold on top of whatever the mortgage is. Even if you multiply Smuggler times 3, that's plus 30 gold. So if you get rid of a level 1 plot, instead of 30 gold, you'll get 60, and a level 2 plot would normally give 60, but you'd get 90, and a level 3 plot normally gives 90 gold, and with Smuggler times 3, you would get 120 gold. If you just have Smuggler times 1 instead of 30, you'd get 40. At level 2, you'd get 70 instead of 60 gold, and a level 3 plot that's destroyed would give you a 100 gold payout instead of 90. One of my favorite greed perk trees is probably this one. I like doing my nationalist perk over here to the side so that I can get Goon, Tycoon, and Planner times 2. So my thieves will get plus 40% crit damage, my mercenaries only cost 13 gold, and I get 100 gold every time I lose a life. And then getting Peddler times 3, that's 3 free shop purchases. So your first purchase would normally cost you 30, the second one's 45, and the third one's 60. So that is 135 gold that you are getting for free worth of cards, ideally in your first shop, because then you're getting your 6 free rerolls from Persistent times 2 using the Moderate perk, and then you should be able to find whatever cards that your build needs in order to succeed. And of course, I've also got my ingenious politician persistent in here. And then of the other perks, I like holy and Castilian. And then you could put whatever other perk you want here. You could start with 30 gold. I feel like, maybe getting more attack speed or more health, 20% HP, that's always nice to have. But these are definitely my favorite for King of Greed perks right here, and I will use them almost every run in some capacity. Alternatively, you could put Nationalist here, and then whether you're going Mercenaries or Thieves, put one of them here so they get ×4. This would make my Mercenaries cost 11 gold each. But remember, whenever you spend 11 gold, that also means you lose Mercenary, so it's easier to get them, but easier to lose them. Getting Peddler ×4 is a 210 gold value if you buy all of your cards in the same shop, because your first card's 30, then 45, 60, and then 75. So that is a lot of free money from the shop. And then, you can keep your planner and goon or swap them out with whatever else you see fit. But these are probably my favorite perk tree setups for King of Greed, and highly recommend that you try them out. So that's it for King of Greed. Alright, next up is the King of Blood. So our first perk that I'm talking about is Summoner. All summons are 10% stronger. This is kind of like Warhorns, the Royal Decree, but instead it's a perk, and it can be multiplied with Verticalist, Leftist, Nationalist, and your summons are like your demon lords from your demon altars, or the imps summoned by the cemeteries, or the imps summoned by your pagoda. Basically anything that says summons. So this is a really nice perk. Next up is Pagan. Start with +1 Demon's Altar in a random corner plot. You can get this multiplied by 4, and you will start with a Demon's Altar in your 4 corner plots. They will all be level 1. If you just have one, it'll be put in a random corner plot. I enjoy starting with one for free. It's one less card to play. You can get multiple of them with easy multiplying, and they scale when all of your troops die. Next is Diabolical. Pagoda can summon +3 imps. Your pagoda is your base, and if you get Evil Pact, which is a royal decree that doubles your imps that can be summoned by your pagoda, this can be a nice thing to multiply, and then you can double that with Evil Pact and then double it again, and it just is a nice little boost to have early game for sure. Next is Cultist. Start with +1 imp card in hand. Again, kind of like the vault cards on King of Greed. It's just nice to have some troops to start with, so getting 1 to 4 imp cards starting in your hand is really, really nice. Next is Blighted. Cemetery summons have +20% HP, so this is on top of Summoner. Your Cemetery summons get +20% HP, which is great. I really like using cemeteries, so getting the extra HP, especially once you multiply that, it can be very, very nice. Next is Draculian. Life drain effects drain +5% life, so this is something like vampirism. You will get +5% on that. Next up is Martyr. Carnage has +10% attack area. Carnage is doing area damage, so obviously getting extra attack area is a great way to hurt more enemy troops at one time. Next is Explosive. Bombers deal +20% damage. And last but not least, Butcher. Manglers have +20% attack area. Your Mangler will eat an adjacent unit to increase its attack damage, and then Butcher can increase the attack area of where that tower shoots its projectile and hit the enemy troops. I really don't use Manglers, but maybe multiplying Butcher by, nationalist, leftist, verticalists, like getting a really big attack area could make Manglers a lot better than if you just throw them down without Butcher. That's what my current perk tree looks like for him. I've got Nationalist ×3 here with Pagan, Summoner, and Diabolical ×4. My strategy here, I start with 4 Demon Altars, so they are getting big from year 1. They're gaining stats. all 4 of them in my 4 corners of my plots. And then summoners, all summons are 10% stronger, so that should include the pagoda imps and the cemetery imps that spawn when your troops die. And then diabolical, pagoda can summon 12 more imps. This like doubles your early game imps that spawn from your pagoda. So if you can really buff your pagoda so that those imps have huge stats, then that can be really helpful. And then if you get Evil Pact, where you double your imps that spawn from your pagoda, then this is a really nice way to get that boosted. Alternatively, if you put Nationalist over here and want to go for like a more all-around troop build with your imps and bombers and things, you could use Cultist to start with 2 imp cards, and then keep Pagan so you at least have some demon altars that are always getting stat increases starting in year 1, and then Blighted will stack with Summoner, so the Summoners make them 10% stronger, and then Blighted makes your Cemetery summons get 20% HP, so times 2 would be 40% more HP. They don't have a lot of HP, so every bit helps. And alternatively, you can always swap out any of these. We've got Explosive, so your bombers deal plus 20% damage, and Martyr, so Carnage gets 8 plus 10% attack area. If you want to go all bombers, you can always throw that here and get a plus 60% damage boost to your bombers. Or if you want to go all in on Carnage and try to get as many stacks of Carnage, you can make their attack area plus 30%. So whatever you put here, it's King of Blood's pretty fun. But yeah, I'm pretty much always having Ingenious, Persistent, Politician, and Castilian with Moderate on all of the perk trees, so the rest is up to you. This is just kind of a strategy that I like to go. So that's it for King of Blood. Alright, next up is King of Nature. So here we have the Healer perk. Treant's attacks are plus 10% stronger. Your Treant is your base, and so multiplying this probably up by 4 so that your Treant's attacks are 40% stronger is really, really strong and very, very nice. So your units will heal more and you will do more damage to your enemies. Next is one of my favorite perks in the game is Gardener. Orchard casts plus 1 root. So your orchard will cast 3 roots per level. So if it's level 3, it'll cast 9 roots. And then with Gardener, it'll cast a 10th root. And I like multiplying this one by 3 or 4 so that it's basically like getting a whole nother level on all of your orchards. So taking Gardener with lots of orchards can be really, really nice. Then I really like doing Pollinator as well. Start with a Mycelium in a random outer plot. This one is interesting. If you take Pollinator and multiply it by 4, you will actually get a level 4 Mycelium in an outer plot, which is crazy, and it's very nice to start with a very buff Mycelium. Next up is Eco-Friendly. Start with plus 1 forest card in your hand. Very nice to start with forests to make sure you can either play them or sell them. It's just a good to have. Tenacious, receive plus 1 Procreate card every time you lose a life. I really like Procreate cards, and so if I'm going to be losing a life, I may as well get a Procreate card, or 2, or 3, or 4, depending on however my perk tree is set up. So that is a great way to very quickly grow your troops. Next is Spreader. All nature troops start with plus 3 units. This is similar to the King of Nothing's perk that gave paladins plus 3 units, but this is applied to all nature troops, so they all get plus 3 units. And again, if you multiply this, they can be really, really broken. I think elves start with 3 units, so just taking this times 1 will double your elves that you would have. If you multiply this by 4, like, you'd be starting with 15 elves instead of 3. It is insane. Next is Toxic. Poison effects deal plus 10% damage. So poison effects from Cauldron or Poison Vial will deal additional damage. I believe this would also work with Poison Thorns or Venom Royal Decrees. Next up is Elven. Elves deal plus 10% damage. Pretty straightforward. And same with Tamer. Boars have plus 10% HP. And of course, boars scale off of HP, so that is a good to have. If you want to go all in on King of Nature cards, you could do this kind of setup where you have the Nationalist perk with Verticalists and Leftists, so that you get ×4 on Healer, Gardener, and Pollinator, or any of these other perks. So then I've got Toxic, Eco-Friendly, and Tenacious. Here you can always swap this out so you get 4 Procreate cards every time you lose a life. I just really like getting my orchards extra roots. I don't know if other people really enjoy that, but I like trapping them with the roots. But 4 Procreate cards every time you lose a life is also really nice. This is not so much buffing your troops, but buffing your treants, and you will start with a level 4 mycelium if you get ×4 on pollinators. So that is just really fun because it's really strong. If you wanted to go more of a troop build, Spreader is really nice, and then maybe you want your boars to get plus 40% HP and your elves can get plus 40% damage. I think it's better to get treant attacks to be stronger than a troop. I'm always in the camp of buff your base and then everything else, because the base will carry most of the time. But this could be a good perk tree here if you are going for like an all troop build where you have elves, boars, and all of your nature troops would start with plus 12 units, which is insane when your elves normally start with 3 troops. They get plus 3 units ×4. So you'll have 15 units on your level 1 elf plot is just crazy. Getting Procreate every time you lose life is just generally, I like to take it. Now, if you're not going to lose a life, feel free to grab another perk here. And then Eco-Friendly is nice because then you can get a forest right away to get your boar HP up even more. So this is another really nice nature perk tree that I like to go with the expanded slots. This is what I prefer to do, is having Nationalist over here and multiplying these by 2, and then I can get my healer ×3 right here above Verticalist, and then using the moderate perk to, again, I always am having my Ingenious Persistent Politician, and here I'd opt for Castilian because the treant base is very, very helpful in keeping your troops alive and healed, so I like to utilize that. And then of course here you can always put a rainbow perk or another universal perk if you want more attack speed on your units, or starting with more plots so that you can have more places to put your forests, troops, mycelium. I just think that having pollinator at all is really strong because mycelium scales like every year, right? Every year it throws out spores that grow and then shoot. So the sooner you get that down, the more spores you'll have and the more damage it'll do. So yeah, that's it for King of Nature. That's kind of what I normally go, but obviously you can do whatever suits your playstyle. These are just kind of ideas for if you don't know how you want to set up your perk tree, or maybe you don't have all the perks unlocked yet. You just kind of want to understand options for setups and strategies. So that's it for King of Nature. Alright, next up is King of Nomads. First, we have the Leader perk. Start with +1 random troop card in your hand. This is really nice to get troops starting in your hand, especially if you like start with a mob card and then you can surround them very quickly in troops. And just having a lot of troops on your board to start with is very nice. Again, you can multiply this with leftist, nationalist, verticalist, and either use those cards or sell them so you can get some money for that shop or to reroll. Next is Khan. The Warlord starts with +10% to all stats. So this is very nice to boost your damage, HP, hits per second, movement speed on your Warlord. And then every time he's hitting your other troops, then they are also getting buffed from the Warlord. So multiplying this by 2, 3, or 4 can be really, really nice. Next up is Immigrant. Gain +1 migration card every expansion tower event. So every time you get to expand your kingdom, you will also get a migration card for free, and you can either use that or dump it in the well. If you multiply it by 2, a neat little trick is if you have like an edge plot and you expand so that you would take the adjacent plot, you can migrate them there and migrate them back because you will get 2 migration cards and you'll get a 20% damage and HP boost from migration because you move them there, so you get +10, and you move them back, so you get +10. Next up is defensive. Shields give +2 or +2% extra HP. So shields normally gives +10 HP or 10%, whichever is more. So getting +2, when you multiply this by 4, you get +8 or +8% extra HP. It is so insane. Your shields either give you 18 or 18% increase in HP, which just scales really fast. So I really love taking defensive like times 3 or 4 because it is broken. And the same goes with aggressive. Aggressive says that swords give +1 or +1% extra damage. Swords normally give +5 damage to a troop or +5%, whichever is higher. So again, multiplying this by 3 or 4, like getting +9 from one swords is insane. And my favorite part of aggressive and defensive is that Smithy works with this. Smithy is a royal decree, a King of Nomads royal decree that says swords and shields have double the effect. So that would mean, hypothetically, we multiply defensive and aggressive each by 4. So shields will give 18. With Smithy, you double that, so it'd be 36 HP off of one card. And then with aggressive, if you did that times 4, so every swords gives +9 damage. With Smithy, one swords would do +18 damage. It is very broken very quickly. I really like these two perks. Next up is Reptilian. Your dragons deal +10% damage. This is a great way if you are using dragons to increase their damage early, and you can also multiply that to really boost their damage. Next is Jurassic. Raptors deal +10% damage, same kind of thing as the dragons dens here on Reptilian. And then Cold increases frost effect by 10%. So Frost slows down the enemy's attacks and movement speed by 20%, and then Cold will increase that percent by 10% for every stack of Cold there is on your perk tree, and again, you can multiply that. And last but not least, we have Rebellious. Mob starts with +3 units. I really don't feel like this is necessary, but if you multiply it and want to start with a bigger mob with like 3 units up to multiply it by 4 and get +12 units, like go for it. I don't know. I just would rather get additional troops in adjacent plots to a mob to get extra units, and King of Nomads has a lot of very nice perks, so I just don't really use Rebellious that much, and that's okay. Alright, now for King of Nomads, this is kind of a perk tree that I would like to go. It's Warlord heavy and troop heavy, just by the nature of the Warlord being a troop, but con times 3 here above verticalist with leftist gives the Warlord +30% to all stats. Then I've got moderate boosting Castilian times 2, so then base gets 20% to all stats. And then on top of that, I've got Swift and Nurturer times 2, so your troops get +10% attack speed and +20% health. So it is kind of a very all-around great way to boost your Warlord, who is a troop. Then over here next to Nationalist, I like having Leader times 2 so that you start with 2 random troops in your hand. And then Aggressive and Defensive are so nice. If you enjoy getting extra damage and extra health, then these are so nice. And then they stack with Smithies, so I always am having those on my perk tree. Then over here with Moderate, again, I've got Ingenious, Politician, Persistent, and we already went over Castilian, Swift, and Nurturer. So that is one of the best all-around perk trees. Of course, if you don't like going swords and shields and you want to focus your troops more, maybe you really like going raptors. I personally don't. Or you like going migration, you can always swap those out. I really just don't use raptors or dragons. And mob starting with 3 units, I don't feel like it's worth it. I'd rather start with troop cards and then level them up later. So that's maybe just my playstyle, but Cold could also be really nice here if you didn't want one of these. You could throw Cold in here and get frost effects increased by +10%, but I don't feel like it's necessary. So that's it for King of Nomads. And of course you could do leftist, verticalist with nationalist. on whichever ones you see as the most valuable, whether that be con with leader or aggressive and defensive with con. But then you have to sacrifice all these other perks. So this is definitely one of the kings that I am pretty much always going to be using this expander and using all of these 15 perk slots for something. So that's it for King of Nomads. Next up is King of Stone. So our first perk here is Warden. Stronghold starts with +1 level. This just means that your stronghold starts with an additional level. So if you multiply this up to 4, then your stronghold starts at level 1, but then gets +4 levels. So it would start at level 5 as long as you had the Ingenious perk to allow it to go past level 3. Otherwise, it's going to be capped at level 3 if you do not take the Ingenious perk, which allows your base to level up +5 times. So just keep that in mind when using Warden, but that is a great way to have a very strong early game. Next up is Sturdy. Walls have +10% HP. Your level 1 walls start at 600 HP, and then they double every time they have a level, so this is a nice thing to have, especially if you multiply it. So it's a great way to increase your wall HP without King of Nature's forests or without shields from King of Nomads. Next up is Hurler. Trebuchet throws +1 rock. This is very similar to the King of Nothing's Scout Tower mechanic, where you get additional arrows. So this one, you just get an additional rock, and if you multiply it, that's a lot more rocks, especially if you're going Trebuchet build. Next up is Incendiary. Flamethrower has +10% attack area. Flamethrowers, I feel, are very, very strong, and so increasing their attack area by 10% or multiplying this by 4 and then getting up to 40% is just really, really strong. So, especially if you can increase their damage with like a quarry or something, they will be doing a lot of damage when they can increase their attack area so much. Next up is Tactician. Start with +1 completely random tower card in hand. This is similar to the King of Nomads thing, where you get a random troop card, but this time you get a tower card because it's King of Stone. So it's nice to start with multiple random towers in your hand, so it's a great way to get cards from other kings. I should have mentioned that on King of Nomads, they do not have to be your king's cards. They can be from any king in the game. Multiplying this by 4 and getting 4 random tower cards in your hand, very, very strong in year 1. Next up is Ballistier. So ballistas start with +3 units. Again, ballistas start with 3 units, same as paladins and elves, so getting +3 units doubles that. And of course, if you multiply this up to 4, then that is up to 15 starting troops on a plot of level 1 ballistas, which is huge. So this can be really good, especially if you can get like the baby boom blessing, and then your ballistas get double the units when baby boom goes off for the prophecy. Very, very strong. I don't normally go ballistas, but if I did, this I would certainly take this and multiply it. Next up is another losing a life perk. So Impervious says losing a life gives you +2 wallmaker cards. This is really nice to have multiplied. If you get this multiplied by 4, you get 8 wallmaker cards when you lose a life, which is just insane. That is almost 3 plots of level 3 walls. So it's very, very fun as long as you have room on your plots to put down more walls, which hopefully you do. Otherwise, you can get Earthworks cards, but otherwise, you dump them in the pit and get money for rerolls or for shops. Next up is Brewer. Cauldrons start with +1 poison stacks. Cauldrons get 1 poison stack per level. So this is similar to the Orchard, where you get your cauldron to level 3, and then they get, they have +1 poison stack. So it's not +1 poison stack per level, but it's just +1 poison. This will give them an additional one, and of course you can multiply that and get them to a higher poison stack sooner. And last but not least, on King of Stone, we've got the Hunter perk. Trappers deal +20% damage. Pretty self-explanatory. They deal +20% damage, and that can be really strong. If you multiply that by 4, they get +80% damage, which is huge. This is the perk tree that I used to beat King 99 on King of Stone when I wasn't allowed to use any troops due to like my challenge wheel that I did. So what I have here is leftist, verticalist, nationalist, and then doing ×4 on warden, sturdy, and incendiary. So warden ×4 means that my stronghold started at level 5, which is so nice. And then that was really helpful when I got Tower Dome as a perk because my towers were building as fast as they would at level 5. I don't know if that scales, honestly. I'd assume it would. So Stronghold starting at level 5, year 1, is just so helpful. Then my walls get 40% more HP, so that was really nice as well. And I mean, my flamethrowers did a good amount of damage, but it really was my Stronghold doing everything, but on maybe a lower difficulty. Flamethrower getting plus 40% attack area is crazy. And then over here, I used Impervious so that I got Wallmaker cards when I lost a life, so that was helpful. If I was allowed to go troops, I would definitely put Ballistier here so that my ballistas start with plus 12 units, just so I had units out in front of my wall and then they could stall longer for my stronghold as well as, doing their damage. So I think I beat King 9-8 when I took the Ballistier perk. It's very nice. And then I did use the expander here so that I could get moderate and use that for ingenious and politician. Those are like my non-negotiables on every perk tree. I don't know if you can tell. Not everybody thinks that getting your base leveled up is the strategy, but I think there is no better way to win a game of 9 kings than to level up your base as high as possible because they get such big stat increases and then you're buffing it from outside sources anyways and then you're leveling it up again. So once your base gets to like level 18, it's just insane. It's really fun. So I highly recommend. Another fun build is if you go kind of all in on your towers. I put Nationalist over to the side so that my Tactician, Hurler, and Incendiary got ×2 multipliers each. So you start with 2 random tower cards in your hand, your Trebuchets throw 2 extra rocks, and your Flamethrowers get 20% attack area. Then if you take moderate with fortifier, your towers start with 20% more damage. Castilian gives your base 20% boost, which is very nice. And then I've got my ingenious politician persistent. I really like impervious because I feel like getting those walls when you lose lives, at least it's better than getting nothing. I don't know, it's a nice little boost to help you try to not lose another life. But if you don't feel like you need that, you could always take like cauldrons starting with an additional poison stack so that you can put cauldrons next to your towers or upgrade your stronghold or ballistas or another universal or rainbow perk. I have my walls here as plus 30% HP. You could of course put any of these here and swap these out so you could start with 3 random tower cards in your hand and just get plus 20% HP to your walls. That's honestly probably what this perk tree should be. And if you wanted to go more troop focused, I would put Ballistier here so that it gets plus 9 units. I would probably do Sturdy, Brewer, and Hunter next to Nationalist so that your walls get extra HP, your cauldrons start with 2 extra poison stacks, and your trappers deal 40% more damage. And then, of course, you could swap out Fortifier for like Nurturer or Swift or Wrathful, whatever you see fit. And then if you didn't want to buff your base and still buff your troops, you could pick out another for them, like Nurturer. So that's it for King of Stone. These 2 perks here are very strong. We've got the progressive perk. All progress troops can now level up plus 1 time. So if you multiply that up to plus 4 levels is insane. So that would mean level 7 is possible on your defenders and executioners. Your lab rats have no max level, so that doesn't really matter. But getting your defenders and executioners leveled up to level 7 is very nice. Now, there is a Royal Council decree where you can get no max level on your troops, and that is called Futurism. This is just basically ensuring that you can level up your troops past level 3 without taking that Futurism perk. So this is that option. I believe it has the same like little icon here as well. And Admiral is next. Mothership's movement and attack speed are increased by 10%. If you multiply this by 4, getting plus 40% movement and attack speed on your mothership is great. This is one of the few ways to increase your mothership's movement speed, so definitely consider this perk and multiplying it. Next, we have Bell Assist. All troops start with plus 10% critical chance, which is very nice. You can multiply that. When your troops crit, I believe they do double damage. Next up is Armored. Defenders get plus 10% HP. That's great. You can multiply that and have very tanky defenders. Ranger, Executioners deal plus 20% damage. I don't really prefer this method of increasing your executioner damage. They start with 1 damage, so that means if you just take Ranger times 1, they get 1.2 damage. And yeah, that adds up, but I'd rather try to get a Swords or like a Catharsis Royal Council or a Blacksmith, something else. Just I feel like it is more efficient than taking Ranger, but definitely feel free to take Ranger times 4 and get plus 80% damage, so it'd be 1.8. Because then when you level up, that will be what is increased. Next up is Mad. Converters have plus 10% attack speed. Alright, next up is Innovator. Innovator says start with plus 1 Reinforce card in hand. Reinforce says unit gains plus 1% damage whenever any plot levels up. So this is one where if you multiply it, say by 4, you'll start with 4 Reinforce cards in your hand. You can play them all on the same plot, or you could sell them so you get money for rerolls or for the shop. But if you put 4 stacks of Reinforce on a card, they'll get 4% increase on their damage every time any plot levels up. This can get really powerful once you get some concabulators going where you can upgrade like 9 plots at the same time, or with your overhauls, those can upgrade a lot of plots. And with no max level on lab rats, that is another great way to continue to boost your damage on a troop plot by leveling up your other plots. Next up is Opportunist. Receive plus 1 gold for each level up. Any plot, you get a gold. So this could work out well if you are like leveling up lots of things like your lab rats. Next up is Scientific. Lab rats start with plus 1 level. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, you can multiply this in your lab rats starting as high as level 5. If you multiply Scientific by 4, I personally would rather just level them up myself and then maybe get bonuses from Reinforce and Opportunist. If you haven't gotten the Expander perk yet, or you just want to use the Nationalist times 3 here, then this is the perk tree that I would normally go with. I would do Armored, Admiral, and Progressive times 4. Now with Progressive, if you get the Royal Decree Futurism, then your progress troops get no max level, so it kind of makes this perk irrelevant. So it just kind of depends on if you are going to be playing and rerolling for that Futurism perk, or if you'd rather just say, you know what, my troops can get to level 7, with this 4 times multiplier on Progressive, and I'm going to be picking different Royal Decrees. So that is certainly an option if you don't want to do that. A couple other good ones to get multiplied by 4. I think I've never gone it, but Opportunist times 4 seems pretty nice, especially with Concabulator. You can get your entire board leveled up, and then all of those level ups you get 4 gold for. I mean, that seems like a really nice way to make money. And then Admiral, that to me is the most important perk on the progress perk tree, so getting that times 4 is so important. And then I just prefer having defenders because they are tanky and can stall so that my mothership can do a lot of damage. Otherwise, if you really wanted, you could start with your lab rats at level 5 because they'd get plus 4 levels, or give all of your troops 40% critical chance hit. Like, that's also really interesting. You could start your executioners with 80% damage. Like, there are so many options. Converters getting plus 40% attack speed. It really just depends on your build. But yeah, Admiral is a really nice perk to get multiplied by 4. Alternatively, if you wanted to go for a more troop-based build on King of Progress, and you wanted to keep buffing the mothership at a times 3, you could put that here in the middle, and then do Armored, Bell Assist, and Ranger around your Nationalist perk over here. And then maybe you take Innovator, so you start with a Reinforced card. And then over here, I've got Moderate, so I've got times 2 on Ingenious, Persistent, Politician, and Castilian. And then this last spot here, of course, you could put Banisher, Seasoned, or you could take Scientific. You'd probably want to take Progressive, but you might want that multiplied instead of maybe your Executioners. Your Executioners start with 1 damage, so getting plus 20% or plus 40% really is just not insane. You can almost achieve the same amount by taking Wrathful, where you get this times 2 because of moderate, so you get plus 10% damage. So that is another option. And you could take like Nurture if you wanted to go all in on like Defenders. Nurture is a great one to take. But yeah, I'm gonna be buffing my mothership, but that's what I have for King of Progress. And last but not least, we have the King of Times perks. So first we have Wise. Wise gives plus 0.1% to all stats to all plots per year played. This is so strong. If you multiply this by 4, you get a plus 0.4% boost to all stats on all of your plots. That is damage, HP, movement speed, crit chance. Like, every single stat is getting multiplied by Wise, and it's every single year. So if you portal back in time, you get your stat increases every single year that is played, not every single year on like the calendar, right? So if you get to year 33, but you've portaled back quite a few times, you could have played 43 years. Well, you'll get the stat increase that many times, whatever year it is, plus the years that you went back in time from your portal, you will get stat increases from Wise. So it is very, very powerful. Next up is Exiler. Bastion attacks warp enemies 10% further. This will buy your troops and your towers more time to do damage to the enemy. So they're put further away so that you get more time. I really like this one so that my troops have more time to do damage. Next up is Physicist. Start with +1 portal card. This is a great way to start with a bunch of portal cards, especially if you multiply it. So, very nice. Invoker. Warper's summons have 10% more HP. I really like using my Warpers and their summons, so getting them more HP is great. So this is definitely one that I would like to multiply along with Wise and Exiler. Next is Horologist. Hourglass attacks start 10% faster. This is nice because your Hourglass attacks start at 0.1 hits per second. So getting them to start 10% faster is nice. This is one that also I'd like to multiply if possible. Next up is Destructive. Orbiters start with plus 10% damage. Self-explanatory on that, your orbiters get more damage. So next up is Agile. All plots start with plus 10% movement speed. This is a great way to increase your movement speed, especially if you multiply this. There are not a lot of things in this game to increase movement speed, except we've got Wise, which will increase all of your stats, which includes movement speed, which is great. And we've got the rainbow card Haste, but that is kind of hard to get, so getting additional movement speed can be really helpful with Agile so that your troops can run faster and catch the other troops. Next up is Brutal. Your first troop starts with +1 adrenaline stack. So this just means your first troop gets an adrenaline stack. You put another troop down, it does not get an adrenaline stack. You can multiply this and your first troop will start with additional adrenaline stacks. And last but not least, the last perk to go over in this video is Manipulative. Enemies have -5% attack speed, so this will slow down your enemies. If you multiply this, you can get this up to -20% attack speed if you multiply this by 4. So that's kind of similar to Frost. This can be really good early game to let your troops attack quicker than your enemies. So here I've got Nationalist ×3 with Verticalist Leftist, and then I have Exiler, Wise, and Manipulative ×4. If I had to choose one perk to get multiplied by 4 or have any multiplication ever, it's Wise, and getting it ×4 is just really nice to get a plus 0.4% stat boost to all of your plots every single year. It really adds up. I know it's under 1% of a stat boost, but it does add up. And then Exiler is nice because it, again, stalls, so your Bastion warps enemies 40% further than it would normally, so I like that. And then Manipulative enemies get minus 5% attack speed times 4, so minus 20% attack speed. That can be a lot of attack speed. It's definitely an option. You could also start with like 4 portal cards with Physicist. Just make sure you don't level them up and go back in time like year like 1 or 2, because you're gonna go back to a negative year and you'll have to fight the champion of time, but his name's backwards. So it's a real interesting one that you definitely, I don't think, can win year 1. So just be careful of that. But you could also, go all in on orbiter damage or your hourglass attacks. This one could be really nice. Horologist times 4, so your hourglass attacks start 40% faster. So this is like the mini perk tree if you don't have expander. So then if you do use the expander perk with leftist verticalist here, you can get times 3 on Ys, which is still very, very nice. And then Nationalist over here gives a times 2 multiplier to Horologist, Exiler, and Manipulative. So then this build, you would be boosting your Hourglass, and you can put Fortifier down. And then with Moderate, Politician, Ingenious, Persistent, Castilian, and something like Nurturer or something could be good here. My one thing is Nurturer here, I feel like, is the better version of Invoker here, because you don't have to put it next to the Nationalists for it to be times 2, and Invoker also gives 10% HP to the summons, but Nurturer will give all troops plus 20% HP instead of just the Warper summons. So that's my caveat for Nurturer versus Invoker. But I also like Brutal, like your first troop and only your first troop starts with an adrenaline stack. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't feel like it's worth, but I'm sure there's people out there who multiply this by 4 and get +4 adrenaline stacks and just stack them on their troops. And alternatively, of course, you could put Physicist in any of these spots and just start with a portal card that's 1 less card you either have to buy or pick from a loot event, and then you have a portal. That is it for King of Time. Alright, well that's it for the 81 King perks in 9 Kings, along with some of the suggested perk tree builds, and it's just to give you some ideas. Obviously, feel free to play around, and the only way to unlock all of these perks is by keep playing on a king until you get all 9 perks unlocked. So just keep playing and having fun, and hopefully at some point you'll be able to get all of the perks unlocked and make whatever perk tree your heart desires. So I wish you the best of luck and have fun playing 9 Kings. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please feel free to drop a like and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new 9 Kings content. And as always, thanks for watching.